Well, while we wait for him, maybe you could just introduce yourself and just talk about, it sounds like your company does a wide array of things. Just kind of give us some background on who you are, what you do in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Faye Powell. I'm the Director of Education and Training at Unity Road. I've been in the cannabis industry since 2012, 2013, and I've worn a lot of different hats in this industry. Currently, what I do is I build out all of the training and education that's necessary for our franchise partners and their teams to run a successful, compliant dispensary. But I've done all different types of things. Worked in a lot of real estate licensing, getting conditional use permits, worked in marketing, did a lot of research, did a lot of application writing. But eventually I found my passion for training and education when I found a lack of consistency in the cannabis industry and the experience that we have store to store. And so it became kind of a little personal thing for me to try and make it more consistent. My involvement in the cannabis industry is quite personal. I was in real estate and I was making great money doing all the things. And then I got an opportunity to work in cannabis, and I saw it as an opportunity to help people with epilepsy, people with Huntington's disease, and people with Parkinson's. And I have family members who suffer from all three of those ailments. And so it's been a really, really fantastic way for me to have an impact on those communities where I otherwise probably wouldn't have been able to have such a far reach. So it's been a really great ride so far.
Thanks for the background. And now we've got Dr. Lev Spivak Berndorf. Thanks. You can hear me, I assume?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep. To start off, Faye just kind of gave me a little background on what she's doing in the industry and what she has done. And I think that'd be great for you just to kind of talk about where you work, what are you doing on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Gus. Appreciate it. Yeah, my name is Lev Spivak Berndorf. I'm the Chief Scientific Officer, one of the founders of Sci Labs or PSI Labs. And we're a safety compliance facility, so kind of what's generally known as a testing lab for the cannabis industry. So before products go to the shelf, they have to pass through a lab like ours, and they're subjected to a battery of tests for different contaminants, as well as the beneficial compounds of interest that we're looking for, like the cannabinoids and terpenes in some cases. So it's the process of really quality and safety control for the cannabis and cannabis infused products and concentrates before they get to the shelves. So we've been in business since 2015, before both the MMFLA licensing act for cannabis for medical, as well as for recreational. We were the first licensed lab for both medical and recreational once that rolled out. So we've been, in the Michigan cannabis scene for quite a while now.
All right. And you've helped me out with plenty of lab related stories in the past, so I appreciate that. Faye, going back to what you had talked about, what you're doing, putting together these teams, I'm kind of curious, like how that scenario works, like who is contacting you, and then what are you doing?
That's a great question. So Unity Road is a franchise, right? And so we have people who contact us who are interested in opening a franchise. And once we get them through license acquisition, once they have a location, then I step in and I help them first learn about cannabis, learn about the plant, learn about the products, learn about what it takes to run a successful dispensary, and then start to help them wrap their head around the operations, what it looks like day to day, and the type of team that you have to configure in order for it to run ship shape, right? You want to be compliant, we want to be successful. How do you put together that team? How do you choose the right people? And how do you train them effectively to make sure that they're communicating properly, not only about the product, but what we do as a company?
So, I mean, how would you describe what that perfect team is? What are the traits that their employees need to have?
I would say that strong management is key. If we have partners who are working with their teams directly, if they're going to be the management, then they need to really be sure that they're present in their business, or the management is present. People who understand your systems, people who can learn a system, a method, a formula, and say, this is what we're going to repeat day in and day out. But I think that at the end of the day, in cannabis, the one thing that I look for above anything else is an empathic person, somebody who can have someone walk in, be able to read that person and respond to their needs appropriately, right? And so that's a special kind of person. That's not something that can necessarily be trained or educated. It's something that people have, or they don't. That you need to be able to read people, to react, to treat people. Like when somebody comes in and they may be shopping on the rec side, but it could be true that they are a medical user, right? They're consuming cannabis for a medical reason. And if I'm in the dispensary, I see someone come in and they're real tight, close to themselves, avoiding other people, or it's loud for them, or they seem overwhelmed. And well, I'm going to assume that person's probably struggling with a little bit of anxiety, or perhaps that person has some sort of PTSD or whatever. So I'm going to be quieter with that person, or things like that. So for our team to be able to do that. And then also, one of the things I do when I'm interviewing is I throw a question on there. Just, I know will be out of the realm of normal questions, like some algebra, cannabis math type thing. If you have this much flower and it tests at this and you get 80% of your maximum yield, how many milligrams would be here or there? And it's not necessarily to see, does this person know how to do this math? It's more so, does this person have the drive to learn? Do they want to be able to use these tools later on to be able to help people? Because we're educating them and we're training them, but they have to turn around and educate and train the consumer on how to use these products, how to read test results, what to look for in a product, things like that.
And I saying that, I mean, I think there is probably a false stereotype a lot of times when it comes to especially the retail side, like bud tenders, thinking kind of the hippie salesperson who may not be that adept to the business. I mean, does that hold true? Do you see that people are more sophisticated than that when they enter the industry?
I think that quote unquote stoners get a bad rap, right? I think that you do have a lot of young people in the industry who are working at that store level. And so some people just need a little bit time to develop, to grow. But I do see that people are far more capable of learning these things than we naturally give them credit for. I see a lot of very bright people in the industry. Not going to say that when I walk in, occasionally I do come across somebody where I'm like, oh my goodness, could you not eat 1,000 milligram edible before you go to work? Or not anyone working with me, but when I go into a dispensary, it's just kind of like, are you like this, or is this the result of consuming a product? So I think that people are above what we normally give them credit for, but there's always the spade, right? There's always the person who can't keep up, but that's in any industry, right? You go anywhere and you have that weak link, right?
Right. So Lev, I mean, I've been in a couple of labs lately. I observed someone picking up samples. I've seen all these different types of jobs that exist in the safety compliance world. Can you talk about how your company has grown, I'm sure, astronomically over the last 5 years or so. So what is it like now? What is your staffing like, and who are you hiring, and what qualifications do people need to get on the science side of cannabis?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think something to consider for the science side is that we often attract individuals who may not be the typical, for the cannabis industry in some sense, in that, we have people who are also just interested in science as well. And then this is just a new and emerging, rapidly growing area of science that appeals to them more for the excitement of that aspect than the cannabis. Now, we also have people who are, interested in cannabis and consumers themselves and happen to be scientists as well, like myself. And, they fit very well and nicely into our program also, and can, help provide some insight sometimes into the products themselves and how that relates to the data, which actually can be, very useful. It's important to sort of know your subject matter as a scientist and kind of know the jargon and the natural range of potencies, for example, you might see, so that you can recognize, issues that would be popping up in the lab where you may have some data that needs to be rechecked and there may be an issue with it. So, it's a very kind of different side of the industry, I'd say. Labs in general, I've always believed, are a great place to bring people in of all different skill levels. There's tasks that are kind of don't require as much advanced training to be able to do them. And it's a great kind of foot in the door and way to start building up your experience doing science and following the scientific method and producing high quality results, all the way up to, we're hiring these days PhDs from the University of Michigan who are already coming out of the chemistry department with substantial experience running the equipment that we use and doing the types of assays that we do, and may even have experience that we can lend to our clients in terms of providing consultation for chemistry projects they're working on with their own products and other exciting ways that we can interface with the clients like that. So, there's still a whole range of skill levels required and all different types of people, and even non-scientists, or people who appreciate science but aren't necessarily formally trained kind of in the front end and in the sampling side of things. So it really is a nice diverse environment to bring together a lot of different types of people with different interests and different skill levels.
And I assume everything is fluctuating so much as far with the industry and with even just the labor force in general. There's a lot of talk about worker shortages. I guess for both of you, I guess I'm interested in are you facing worker shortages right now in any certain jobs? And really, what are people being paid to perform these jobs? Obviously, there's a big difference between a PhD and a field sample collector, but if you could kind of share that, if you want to start off, Liv.
Sure. Yeah. So, our pay starts at about 50,000 on the low end for sort of entry level positions and goes all the way up to above six figures, depending on what role you have in the laboratory in terms of kind of management and responsibilities. So, fairly comparable to other lab industries. I think maybe a little on the higher end, just knowing that the cannabis industry, that's kind of an expectation. And we live in Ann Arbor, sort of higher standard of living here in terms of the cost of living. So we try to accommodate that as well. But yeah, it's the pandemic was challenging for us, I think, more so in terms of just navigating all these, challenges to keep everybody safe. But we were working all through it and really didn't have, a shortage of employees. It is, of course, it takes time to train employees. So, anytime you sort of have someone leave to move out of state to be with a partner or take a different job, it's a bit of a setback just to make sure they're kind of at the skill level they need to be to fit into our organization. But it's an important ongoing process, and we're happy to help train people and bring them on board with what we do.
And Faye?
So it's interesting, right? Because we are a franchise, so we don't tell our franchise partners what they need to pay their employees. So I would say that most people at the entry level would start just over minimum wage, and management can make a good salary. But I don't necessarily know that I can share numbers because it's super inconsistent based on the market that they're open in and the skill level of the people that they're bringing in. But just to mirror what Lev was saying, that the amount of training that goes into just even a host, somebody who greets somebody at the door, is extensive. And so retention is key. And so I've seen personally in the cannabis industry where maybe people get brought on just over minimum wage, but then they'll go through a 90-day probationary period and then they get a significant bump just to be part of the team. Another thing I saw through the pandemic was many people had to leave restaurant industry jobs and retail industry jobs. Like high-end stores were closed, restaurants were closed. And a lot of those people, like I mentioned before, younger people work in those industries. And so that's a definite parallel to what we have in our industry, the cannabis industry. A lot of those people migrated. We actually had a huge influx of people interested in working in the industry. And so there's something that changes state to state too, that's kind of interesting, and that's licensing for employees. So for example, in Arizona, if I want to work at a dispensary or work for a company, work for a cultivation, I've got to have a card, a dispensary agent card that is assigned to this location, this location. So if I get a job at one dispensary, I have to go get a new card that's assigned to this other dispensary, which is a pretty good cost associated with it, and time and all this. In Colorado, I have one card and I could go anywhere. And so that makes it easier to hire people, and they don't have to go through all the same process. But I would say at this point, if there is a worker shortage, it's because people are going back to the restaurant, back to the retail, and you see people who you see a lot of turnover as well in the entry level positions. So you don't get to like graduate people up to management as often as you would like to, but that retention, that training is what we hope keeps them in, gets them making more money.
Right. One area both of your jobs cross paths is really the testing. I mean, that's kind of the final hurdle that any product has to clear before it hits a retail shelf. And I've been at a couple labs lately, and I keep hearing that there's this inconsistency. Like if you were to give the same sample to 4 labs, you might get 4 results for THC content and other information that makes its way to the consumer. And I guess for Lev, my question for you is, how confident can consumers be in the packaging that they're reading, or any other information they can get from the lab that is attached to that product? And how can it be improved? How can we give more confidence to customers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's a widely known issue across the industry, not just here in Michigan, that, kind of what you'd call lab shopping is an issue where, because the regulatory methods and procedures in this industry are so new and really not that well established yet, you can run into problems where, lab practices are not standardized, and this can contribute to greater variability. You can also have situations where labs sort of don't have an incentive to be accurate. The client prefers the data to be, in a sense, inaccurate in a way that's favorable to their growth. So if you're a lab that gives higher potencies than sort of the other labs around you, or you're a lab that gives less fails for common failures like microbial issues in other labs, you often find yourself, in the short term at least, more successful. Now, some states are starting to kind of catch on and get more sophisticated in their auditing and enforcement abilities. There's just recently a lab in Nevada that's been shut down numerous times. They're at risk of losing their license for a decade, I think, at this point, due to systematic potency inflation and diminishing microbial fails. There's labs in Washington that have been called out for this. So the reality is it's a challenging job for any regulatory agency doing this. I think MRA has done a great job so far at attempting to understand and start to chip away at some of these issues that might exist. Some of it can be just accidental as well, where labs don't necessarily know that they're off. And there are issues that go beyond a single lab's environment that can cause that. For example, we could get a standard from a company, a reference material we're using to calibrate our instruments, and then weeks later you'll get a notice from them saying it was off by an amount that essentially is bigger than the state would allow a client to be off from the label of their potency. So there are occasional issues where we all still have to be very aware and sharp about what's happening around us, what the newest updates are, if there are any changes like that. And you do have to have an extremely high level of kind of personal dedication as a laboratory outfit to accuracy. The state may not enforce it as much as you want them to. You kind of have to self-select and do that. So that's how we run our lab. We just strive for achieving the highest accuracy possible, sometimes at the cost of losing business, but for us, it's really about the long game, because eventually people will want to know the truth and will want to understand that not all cannabis is 32% and the average is closer to 17 to 18, and you still get really nice feeling off of that and very great medical effects. And, it's not always the most potent flower you want. You may want a lighter flower for a different time, but it makes money right now and it's marketing. So there's a lot of layers of sophistication to the market that I think have to continue to develop for this to get better. In Michigan specifically, I think we could really benefit from increased transparency. So the more that, for example, we would all be able to access the data in the seed to sale tracking system, the better it would be. In Michigan, that's currently impossible. You cannot FOIA it, you cannot access it. Many other states either publicly, publish it or do allow people to access it through FOIA inquiries. And so whether it's individuals from other labs who get to see this, or whether the state decides to outsource that to professional statisticians to analyze whether labs seem to be systematically inflating potencies, for example, or having far lower microbial fails than other labs, that's the kind of stuff that's really going to continue to push this to where it needs to be. But there's also no substitute for on-the-ground enforcement. The more the MRA continues to add skilled individuals and just more people who can get out there, look at the labs, look through their data, work with the third-party accreditors to also look through that data and determine its accuracy and make sure everyone's doing their best to deliver those accurate results. It creates a level playing field for the industry that we need. Without that, there's a lot of risk of people sort of abusing science to make more money.
And like one aspect is the microbials, mold getting in your product. And I know no one wants to, like we talked about how brand is so important. Faye, you are sometimes on the end where you are dealing with this end product. And I think you spoke about an instance where something got through lab testing that may shouldn't, or either the mold came after the fact or it maybe shouldn't have passed. But can you kind of share that story?
Yeah, absolutely. So in Arizona, we recently just passed our recreational law. And when that happened, testing became required. And before that, testing was not required and there were no rules, regulations, or anything around it. And so the way you all do it in Michigan, it's fantastic. You go in there, you do a real check where you go around the entire batch and the whole thing, and you find the points and you pull and you get an accurate description of what that batch as a whole will be. Well, in Arizona, that's not how it works now. And it's definitely not how it worked before we had the regulation. And so what they would do is they'd go to I know what they do. They go to the highest cola or the prettiest bud, and they find the one with the most trichomes, and they send that to the lab because it's going to be the highest testing or whatever, right? And that has been a problem here. And then I'll get to that in a minute. But basically what has happened is they test one nug from a batch, and then they send out pounds and pounds of that batch of flour. And so I've been on the side where I'll receive flour, I'll open it up, start packaging it down. There's pounds we're putting into eighths and grams and half ounces. First couple of bags, first couple pounds we go through, seems fine. And then I look and I get a little closer and I see a little PM, powdery mildew in there, in the flour. And so I take a nug and I take everybody who's packaging flour and I crack it open and I say, okay, everybody look at this. This is bad stuff. So now what we need to do is take all of the stuff that we package, we got to pack it back up and we got to call and we got to tell them this batch needs to be destroyed. Come pick it up. We're not taking it. Even though you have testing for it, my eyes, my nose, I'm not going to consume that, and I'm certainly not going to sell it to somebody with cancer. Come on.
And I assume good companies appreciate that quality check there. We're just about out of time. I don't know, Lev, if you have any quick comments you want to add before we go back to the stage?
No, I was going to say that's a great point. Michigan already does have a really good system of not letting the growers self-sample. Some states do that, and that's essentially a fatal flaw in any testing program that starts out and it sets the test off at a bias right from the beginning, because as Faye said, they'll pick the best looking flour that doesn't have the obvious powdery mildew or mold growing on it, and that's kind of the issue there. So whenever we go on site to a facility and do an official compliance sampling for something that will end up on a dispensary shelf, we get to look at it, sample the whole thing. So that's a really important part of this process here.
Right. I got to see that process recently and it was interesting. So, all right. Thanks for talking. It was good information from both of you, and I'm headed back to the main stage and go ahead back there.
All right,
Thank you.
Thanks.